Welcome to the Everyday Citizens Tactical Podcast, Episode 19, Evolution of Training and Culture. My name is Jeremy and I will be your host. Today I'm joined by Zadge, a shared owner of Endless Search Development Group and a firearms instructor local to Indiana. Today we discuss a wide range of topics in regard to training, preparedness, gear, and culture for the civilian bases. So, let's dive in.
Tell me turn it down and I'ma only turn up louder. Call me what you wanna, but you can't call me no coward. Strength in numbers, we the people, still the ones with power. Fighting fire with fire, time to take back what is ours. Tell me turn it down and I'ma only turn up louder. Call me what you wanna, but you can't call me no coward. Strength in numbers, we the people, still the ones with power. Fighting fire with fire, time to take back what is ours.
Alright guys, welcome back to the podcast, and Zadge, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
We got really an open-ended game to really talk about here. But first, if you kind of want to give everybody the rundown on who you are and what you're about.
Oh man, really, I'm nobody. One of the owners of Endless Search Development Group. I've been shooting like in this type of space, in this type of community for since I graduated back in 2012. Dating myself right there though, but that's pretty much it. I'm a guy who likes learning things and teaching things.
For those that have not ever met him in person, he is a tall, beautifully bearded man. You were a lot bigger in person the first time I met you than I thought you were going to be. I'll be completely honest. I was like, damn, that man's massive.
Take it as a compliment.
Hell yeah. Your kids will be warriors. So Endless Search Development Group. Do you kind of want to talk about where that comes from, and why you guys kind of decided to launch your own project?
Yeah, sure. So at the time, shortly before we started Endless Search Development Group, I was with S&G Armament, and it wasn't working out for me. I saw things a little bit differently than my other business partner. And Coulter, who was with me in that, there was a 3-man operation, me, Coulter, and the other guy. Me and Coulter decided that we wanted to go somewhere else, do our own thing, and really focus on, have a different focus. It wasn't just about gun parts and shit. We wanted to train with people, we wanted to engage, and the search to learn and gain knowledge was endless. There is no ending point. So we let's just call it Endless Search Development Group, because we do want to develop new products, and we kind of, we want to get out ahead of things and then really be able to, put them out in a digestible form for anybody that wants to learn it. So, yeah.
You guys don't have a website right now, correct?
No. Oh my God.
I did not think so. I looked for one, but I couldn't find it.
We are so, we want to make sure everyone, like me, Uriah, and Coulter, we all want to make sure that we got all of our T's crossed and our I's dotted with the legalese and all that before we do it. We're right on the cusp of creating a website, but yeah, right now it is not up. Gotcha.
Okay, but you are on Instagram, so for those that are interested, I will put that in his bio down below. Have you guys messed around with any type of actual gear development yet, as far as like in-house, not necessarily out-of-house testing?
Yes, actually. One of our first products that we're going to develop is a sling, because we figure it's easy enough. As we've discovered, it's not easy enough, but
it never is.
That's anything really, because we want to put out a quality product. But Coulter is in charge of doing that. We want to put out an affordable sling that works for just like a general purpose rifle, and then kind of build off that for like the LSW type rifles and things. But that's what we're doing right now. That's our first like product we're developing, is a sling. Because hey, if there's a million different slings out there, but if you want to support us and you feel like we put out a good product, cool, you can buy our sling. Other than that, I've been offering rifle classes. I've slimmed down the amount of classes that we're offering this year, simply because I do have a child on the way, so I need to plan around that. Thank you.
Do you feel like How have you guys been doing signups for the class without the website? How can guys get a hold of you for that?
Man, I'll tell you, if I were on the other end of it, I would be like, it's kind of sketch. I don't know, but like, I guess just people have, through word of mouth, through guys who have taken classes through me before, and people who have like worked with us have been like, hey, yeah, this guy he can teach you what he's offering to teach. But what it is people just hit up our Instagram, hey, I'd like to sign up for this class, and usually they'll say, I see you don't have a website, and I'm like, hey, give me your name, your phone number. I'm going to put you down on our schedule, and then I'll send you the details, the final details before the class and everything. But yeah, right now it's just bring cash day of.
Gotcha. Do you see the company being more training oriented or gear oriented in the long term plan?
Man, it really depends. I would like to see, personally, because I focus on the training aspect of it, I would like to see more of the training aspect grow, because in turn that means that I've learned more and I'm confident enough in what I've learned to teach it to other people. So that means I will have grown exponentially if I'm able to, offer those types of classes. So, yeah.
Developing gear is a hell of a commitment and very resource demanding.
Yeah.
I've looked into development in-house here for us on a few different projects, and the skill set alone, specifically if you're trying to work with like nylon or something, the resources needed, machines, material, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a demanding project to say the least. Just today, actually, in the mail, I've kind of put developing our own gear on the back burner, but just today in the mail, I have gotten a box from a company that we're looking to work with as a distributor. They sent us a bunch of their gear to look over and decide, what we would want to sell through our website. I won't say it live on air just because nothing is super official yet, but we've done some work with them in the past. So I'm trying to get into the gear side a little more. I think I've talked to you about it in the past, and I've talked about it on YouTube briefly.
Yes, we have talked about it.
I kind of want to open a retail facility outside of training that can be a place for people to get reliable, purpose-driven gear, not just a bunch of junk that happens to be sold at their local sporting goods store.
Yes.
So I feel like this is kind of a step in that direction on our side, but yeah, gear is that's a project, to say the least.
Oh, dude, it is, and I gotta say, I'm very excited for you to be like breaking into that, because the demand is there. There's a lot of people who are like, oh, I just want to do it online, and doing it online is, it's the safe way to do it, and it's really hard to put up the money for a storefront, but the demand is there, and it's only going to grow. I can say that for sure.
And I feel like, at least I think I can speak for most people, is if you could go in person and literally hold something in front of you and see whether you like it or not. Is this the size that I wanted? Is this the cut that I wanted? Is this truly the correct shade color that I wanted of this pouch, sling, etc., etc., etc.? That carries a whole lot of weight. How many variations of OD green is there online?
Too many.
Too many. So I think it could definitely change the game. But you're right. That's a lot of upfront capital. So
yeah,
and the economy is not kind to us small business owners.
God, no. Fuck no, dude.
and it's not the fault of the customer base by any means.
No,
it's
it is not.
A product of the times, unfortunately.
Yep. But if there is a person out there who can't afford to do it and can do it right, they're going to succeed. Just look at Commando Store. As one example. But yeah.
So outside of the business page, your personal page yourself, you seem, especially I'd say over the past several months, have really kind of started coming into being an influencer of culture, I would say. I use the word culture a lot, and I talk about culture with a lot of my guests because I feel like there's so many different aspects to the 2A culture at this point, or whatever title we're putting on it. And I feel like discussing the culture of it more embraces the change and progress of culture.
Yes.
But you seem to be a pretty big, I guess, influencer of this sense. I say influencer in a good way, not like you have 15,000 followers influencer sense, but just like
No,
quality content and a good message.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that the other day, about the word influencer, and I was like, it has a negative connotation to it, but really, if you think about it, you are influencing culture. I mean, if you think about it the right way, I mean, it is a compliment.
Mm-hmm. Has your page ever been deleted?
I guess some wood I'm gonna knock on. No, it's not yet.
How is your page not more popular? I don't understand.
Because
I'm looking at your page right now. This is all quality content.
I appreciate it, and I'll say the majority of that, because it is Instagram, I gotta give a shout out to my brother Uriah. He's got like 3 different Instagram profiles, but he's a photographer, and I'll tell you what, he's damn good at it. That's one reason I wanted him in the business. Is we used to actually play music together, and we were in a band that was about to start touring. But when he played guitar, it was like, hey, this guy's he fucking commits. He's good at what he does, and he commits himself to what he does. And I was like, hey, we gotta start a business together. But yeah, a lot of the credit goes to him. He does a lot of great photography, and I've been able to use some of that.
Photography and videography is so important. You're familiar with Dirty Civilian, Drew Hopkins' new project, right?
Oh yeah, yep.
Their content quality is on a different level.
It's near cinematic.
It really is. Yeah. I am very jealous. Since I've started doing anything in regard to this, I've been recording everything on my iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
I edit, take, record, post everything on my iPhone. I am looking into getting a camera within the next 6 months, like an actual good, high quality camera. I feel like it's just one of those business expenses that has to be done.
It's well worth it, especially when you have someone who knows how to use it. But the problem that you always run into is the photographer's curse. It's when you're the photographer and there's a CQB class, everyone's like, oh man, we don't really get to do a CQB class very often. We've got a cool facility. Hey, Uriah, or hey, photographer, bring your camera. And it's like, well, they're going to spend 3/4 of their time getting content instead of learning.
For sure.
But it does help. Propaganda in a good way. The better it looks, the more attractive it is. Yeah.
So I guess one of the big things I kind of want to dive into as far as culture goes is, what do you think has caused the big shift in ideology from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic?
That's a really good question, a really good topic, and unfortunately, I'm able to talk about things for a really long time. So, but I do want to say I think I have somewhat of a unique perspective on this, simply because, being in this, for lack of a better term, community shooting scene, whatever, since, like I said, 2012, back when it was cringe to wear a plate carrier to a gun range and people looked at you like you were a fucking nut. I have to say that, while I didn't have all the knowledge then that I have now, of course, I had the same sort of mindset. And working at gun stores and like interacting, with the public on a daily basis, there was definitely like a hard shift. And I want to say that actually started before the pandemic.
Okay.
It might just be the way that maybe it's my personal bias. Like I want to see things that way or whatever. But, that's what I truly think. I think I seen it before the pandemic because there was sort of not necessarily that it was cool, but it's like, hey, look, maybe we need this because things are starting to get a little weird. And it's like 2020 was just like very, it was like accelerated, it was time accelerated and everything happened really quickly. And it lit a fire under people's ass. But I mean, you've seen people who lived in the country in rather secluded areas even buying armor and thinking, hey, one day this could show up on my doorstep, even though it's happening 40-something miles away over in Louisville, Kentucky. Mm-hmm. Just in my neck of the woods, that's what I seen. And it's like, the average individual might think, hey, why is this guy who lives, 10 miles out from a small town where nothing even happened, buying armor and rifles and training and all this other stuff. But I think the more that people expose themselves to real life and to everything that was going on before and after the pandemic, but the pandemic kind of highlighted everything. But the more they expose themselves to that, the more they realize I'm responsible for my own safety and for the safety of my family. And it comes down to more than just rioters. It comes down to, really, I think Hurricane Katrina was one of the biggest examples of, or it was a really good example, and that should have woke people up. But it's simply for the lack of news coverage on that. It didn't.
Yeah.
Me, myself, it didn't wait. Like, I didn't realize how bad Katrina was until I came across, I used to browse 4chan all the time. And I came across a Hurricane Katrina thread, and I was like, this looks interesting. And then I seen dead bodies in the streets, pictures of gunfights on overpasses, and started reading accounts and everything else. And I was like, holy shit. But I think that people realizing that the world we live in is not the norm. We don't live in what's considered the norm here in the United States. We're rather secure.
Sure, absolutely. And I think with I would say the side of the community or culture that we kind of sit on, 2020 kind of served, and really since 2020 has kind of served as a multi-faced way of changing people's social and cultural beliefs. Because on one end, we had everything with the Summer of Love, which I'd like to get back to Louisville in a minute because I'm also very familiar with that. We had everything that happened with the Summer of Love, the BLM and Antifa riots. And I don't think people, as much as there was media coverage around it, I don't think people truly grasp how violent some places really got. And even places that did not have media coverage were there still nonetheless very violent. Almost animal-like in some senses. And that's not a racial bit by any means. It's just quite literally like human, instinctually, animal-like violence.
Oh, yeah. That's if I can interrupt
Go ahead.
real quick. Are you familiar with Gustave Le Bon?
Vaguely.
Okay, so I can't even say I'm that familiar with him, but he wrote a book. It was called it was about how people get when they're in a group, and this was written in the I think it was the late 1800s. Could be wrong on that, but I have yet to pick up the book. I need to just get it on Audible. I need to make a note, but it's about humans and how our mind changes once we get into a group setting. And it's really interesting because you've seen a lot of this in real life, in real time, as the mobs were moving around major cities. But it's a very interesting to look into, and it's very interesting to think about. But as you were saying,
so we had the one portion of this, which was the riots and the socialist militant side of all this, and then on the other side, I think people of more right-leaning political ideology started to realize that the state, and I mean the state as in government, not necessarily the specific state government, but just government as a whole, is not quite as on your side, even at the local level, as people maybe once thought. And as always, this is not a pro or anti-cop conversation. We always look at things objectively and unbiased. But in a lot of places and at different levels of law enforcement, very extreme lockdown policies and mandates and rules and whatnot were enforced sometime through very physical force in some places of the country. Your little 2,500 person town might not have been that way, but that doesn't mean the suburban town 15 miles away from you where major trade and logistics happens out of that supports your little town didn't also get exposed to that. And that goes even heavier onto the federal agency side as well, as far as labeling parents domestic terrorists possibly at school conferences, and the extensive amounts of spying and all that kind of stuff. A lot of people forget that when COVID first happened, that Trump placed Pence in charge of various surveillance programs aimed at COVID policies.
Yep.
And I think, just to summarize all of it, is that people kind of started to see that it wasn't so black and blue, left versus right, me versus you. It's kind of like, it seems like all of the odds are against me and I'm kind of on my own. And I think a lot of people started to realize that.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%, man.
But back to if you'd like to, we can kind of dive into the Louisville thing.
Yeah. I sort of have an interesting perspective on that, man. I was on vacation. I took 2 weeks off at a time. I was on vacation and I had nothing better to do. And a friend that I had worked on short films with messaged me out of the blue and he said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "You want to come work security?" I was like, "What?" Sure. And turns out he had started a small security company, and he I guess had some sort of a contract or was subcontracted out to do security for WLKY, and they covered the NFAC rallies, and so I went with them to one of those, and that was an interesting time. That was really interesting.
A lot of Kentuckians, and I'm sure it's kind of the same for Southern Indiana as well, since you guys are very Louisville close, but a lot of Kentuckians don't realize how truly violent Louisville was and how organized the movement was there for about 5 to 6 months. I know just from my own personal experience, without diluting too much, is that that was none of that was sporadic in Louisville in a sense. After the initial riots broke out kind of nationwide, there were very organized elements of larger networks that kind of pulled the strings and coordinated what happened in Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't know how heavily, explosive devices were used in Louisville and just planted in random, public places.
Yeah.
Aimed at being against police, but if they didn't go off on police, they were just left there, and they may go off when a normal civilian car drives by or someone. Louisville was a wild time.
It was. I know of. I don't think I have the exposure to as much as you did, but through a friend's wife's sister's relation, I happen to know somebody who was who worked with LMPD, and I'm not going to say in what capacity, but he knew a lot about what was going on, and he told me as well about there was like explosive devices planted in certain places. That shit was wild, man.
I think one of the other big things that we learned from 2020 in all the riots, not specifically to Louisville, just across a multitude of cities, is that those efforts were very organized. And I think it kind of gave a little bit of a wake-up call to the general person that may find themselves more to a mindset, aligned in mindset, is that there are people out there that are organizing, planning, and training to do you harm or to destroy your community. It's not a joke. It's not an internet conspiracy theory. It's real. It's very real. For some reason, it only happens around election years, and it gets worse every election year since like 2012. But
yeah,
I think like if I look back outside of like riots and whatnot that happened after like natural disasters, I think like the first big Antifa BLM style riot was like Ferguson, Missouri.
Yes, I remember that.
There was a little bit with like Occupy Wall Street, but it wasn't quite the level of violence that like came at Ferguson, Missouri, and then everything thereafter.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, see, I remember watching Ferguson, Missouri. I remember exactly where I was too. I was at my old boss's house. I had a computer over there. I'd actually lived with him for a short time, and I was in the office on my computer, and I was watching the helicopter news footage, and I just could not believe what I was seeing. As that, that was really one of the first times that I was really exposed to it in real time. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh my goodness, like this is real life. This is insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And really since Ferguson, Missouri, it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And really, people have forgotten 2020 already, but
yeah,
you could still look back on video footage from 2 or 3 dozen major cities across the U.S. where it's crazy. It's insane.
Oh yeah,
we're not being very descriptive at the moment, but it's kind of hard to like really comprehend in a sense.
It is.
Like if I'm playing, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Go ahead.
Because if as we discussed it, I'm sitting here and I'm like replaying videos and other stuff I've seen in my own personal time in my head from all of these events from 2020, and it's like, how did this happen? How did we get here? Like, it truly is hard to understand.
Yeah. Without being like, God, I'm going to sound like a Rick and Morty. Like, well, you have to have a really high IQ to understand Rick and Morty. Like, I'm not trying to be like that, but like, you really do have to really understand and have a good grasp on politics, and not just like the blue versus red politics, but really understand politics and understand, at least have somewhat of an understanding of fringe groups to know or somewhat comprehend what's going on. Mm-hmm. In my spare time, well, not in my spare time, I don't have a lot of that, but while I'm working, which I drive a long way to work, and so when I work, like on the way to work, working, and on the way back, I have about 10 and a half, 11 hours worth of time to listen to podcasts and books and things. So that, that's a nice thing. But I like to, when I'm not listening to, my regulars, I'll listen to far left and far right podcasts just to kind of see what they're saying about each other and see what, what's going on, and see what kind of groups are growing and all that. But it is interesting because you'll see, you can find any day of the week an arrest video of anyone, anywhere, and it can be violent or non-violent. But what is interesting is the fact that once I don't know, maybe it is only around election years, but it's like only certain arrest videos, whether they're violent or not, go viral, and then people protest. But the thing is, people don't necessarily self-organize. That's not really a thing. People get outraged, but because of reactance theory, and because people can comment and repost videos online and shitpost and be mad online, that kind of keeps people from getting out into the streets. So when people do get out into the streets, that has been, like you were talking about, that has been organized. So, seeing what gets protested and what causes riots and what doesn't, mm-hmm. it's really interesting.
The media perception too of gun ownership, because gun ownership has obviously skyrocketed since COVID has started.
Yes.
The media perception of gun ownership when it comes to maybe a socialist guns group or an LGBTQ guns group, or whatever it might be, because there's a lot of those that Vice does and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The coverage of that kind of stuff is completely different than the coverage of somebody from our side, or even if they don't have the ability to go in and see what a right-wing group may be doing. They just take stuff from the internet and just start spewing whatever their political spin is on stuff.
Yeah.
Have you seen any of the little 10-minute documentaries of these socialist gun groups?
Yeah. Sometimes it pains me too, but I watch them because I know it's somewhat important, mm-hmm. to keep an idea or keep tabs on what's going on in the world. not necessarily like, oh well, I need to keep tabs on these furry gun owners because they're a threat to me. But it's like, I mean, just keeping an idea of what's going on in the world, and just staying informed. It's so cringy to watch though, because they blow smoke up these people's asses, and then like you see them go to the range and shoot with all this like ill-fitting gear, and they're always comm block weapons typically. Mm-hmm. But on the contrary, I have seen a few where they are people who have been volunteering for helping out. I think it's the YPG and other like socialist groups in the Middle East. They go over there, and granted, they're probably just sitting in a dirt hut for a few weeks and driving meals and maybe munitions around in a relatively low danger area. But the fact is, they're still doing this stuff, and they're bringing that back, and they're teaching their groups about it.
The big thing right now is the Ukrainian-Russian conflict.
Yeah,
there is a lot of anarchist and Antifa, both American and European-based Antifa groups that have basically been documenting their journey as part of this Foreign Legion group on the Ukrainian side, which is very odd considering Ukraine has an entire battalion dedicated to Nazism, but that's a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
I guess with that being said, the one thing you did say is like, some of these guys are kind of cringy with their ill-fitted gear and all this kind of stuff. But when you think back on it, like 10 years ago, that's kind of what 2A organizing kind of looked like.
Oh yeah. Everybody knows what the woodland-clad fat guys who play militia in the woods look like. Mm-hmm. From like 1992. We remember that.
So
not too far off.
What do these folks look like in 5 to 10 years?
Yeah.
Do they change, adapt, and grow similar to? I wouldn't even call us right-wing leaning people. I really don't know what to call us. Just this realm of Instagram and social media that I think like you and I find ourselves on. I don't think it's right-wing necessarily. It probably is, like, if you truly look down into it, but none of us really call ourselves, like, right-wing.
Yeah. I mean, I like to use the term normal.
Normal is a good word. Because in reality, at this point, I think we are becoming more normal.
Yeah.
Than what our counterparts really look like. But, moving forward, a couple years from now, let's just, stay on our side on the river here. Yeah. Where do you think the culture really goes from here?
So from here, I don't know how many people listening to this seen my last post on Gun Culture 3.5,
which was a great post, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Post. I appreciate that. I called it 3.5 because we're not necessarily at 4.0, because some people are still at the I don't know, I guess you could say like 2.9 or something, but I think from here, where the majority of people at, not necessarily where we are at or, our respective groups are at, but it's the next step and the next evolution is working on logistics, like logistics, communication, everything besides shooting, because everyone has focused on shooting for so long and so hard that I'd say the majority of people have shooting down pretty well, especially considering where we were at pre-2020. Mm-hmm. It was really positive to see everybody tagging each other in their stories, being like, "Hey, let's see your dry fire times, and let's see your this times. And that." Yeah, dude, the 1R1 split time measuring times, those were fun. But now I think it's because you have guys like you have guys like the guys from the Longhouse, and they do I forget how many weeks ago it was, but they were doing like logistics training, and then a couple weeks ago, me and some friends went out and trained, and we were doing water procuring and purification and all that. Mm-hmm. So everybody in some form or another, I think, it's all about logistics. But I think right now we're in the transition phase, going from focusing more on shooting to focusing more on that. That's why I called that post 3.5. So that's where I think we're at, and that's where I think we're going.
And as much as we could probably look at it and we could call it what it really is, which is like a better revamp of the militia movement, I don't think that's what we can call it. I see the community more as preppers who are ready to defend themselves.
Well,
maybe in a sense. I don't know. Am I wrong of that? What do you think?
It's hard to pin down, honestly, because I mean, if you use words in their most literal sense and in their most like boiled, if you really boil it down, the words have been I don't know, ruined, I guess.
Sure.
It's like saying based used to be like, oh, that's based, and it's like, oh, that's cool. But now everyone starts to say based this, based that, and then it becomes cringe. So based cringe, whatever. But so the word militia became very it's like ooh, it's the M word, it's the militia word. And yes, exactly, everyone pictures the overweight dudes in the woods saluting each other and giving themselves like fake ranks and stuff like that. But I mean, when I try to think myself, when I think of the word militia, of our forefathers and the founding fathers and what they did, and it just being a literal community. Like, we are creating a parallel society for I mean, I don't know.
Ooh, that's a good way of putting it.
That's the way I like to think of it, is we're creating a parallel society. Mm-hmm. Whether, society outside of us, outside of our groups and whatnot, and when I say groups, I mean like our families, our friends, the people we shoot and train with, outside of our groups, is like, hey, this trans thing is normal. Like, hey, that's not normal with our family. We have we try to raise our own food. We raise our own gardens. We're going to raise our children a different way, perhaps homeschooling. I mean, really, it starts to, I don't mean clash in a negative way. It starts to clash with just, I don't know, I don't want to say frontier lifestyle, because obviously we're not living on a frontier, but like, we're
going back to the village mindset in a sense.
Yes, we're like a tribal village mindset. We're
taking a step forwards by going backwards.
Yes, and things just being more. And another trend you'll notice is more guys than not are coming back to Christ and coming back. Whether it's Catholicism, Protestantism, whatever, more guys are coming back to it, myself included.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I very much I don't push it as much, and I think it's because I don't feel, what would be the word? Not qualified. I don't speak on it as much as I feel like I should sometimes, but I have noticed that a lot of people have come back to Christianity in a sense, and if not being a devout Christian regardless of domination, at least maybe the ideology of traditionalism that kind of comes with the old sense of Christianity.
Yes.
Because for people like myself, who was a very devout and strict Catholic for a long time, I no longer really associate myself with any specific church, specifically through distrust of man. I think man has ruined religion. So I seek Christ in my own self and my surroundings, instead of being like, I am XYZ title.
Yes,
absolutely. Which is why I feel like I don't really talk about it as much, because I feel like that's kind of unique to me. At least not publicly.
I don't know. I feel like everyone's kind of, not everyone, but I feel like the majority of guys, especially guys who are like, who are, I don't want to say just now joining this movement, but like kind of like the guy who just started paying attention in 2020 is like, he's part of, I don't know, I guess for lack of a better term, our thing now. He's like, hey, these are the values that I have, and they line up with Christianity. So I mean, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, you're a Christian. I mean, that's the way I was raised. Mm-hmm. It's the way most of our guys were raised. So I mean, whether it's Protestantism or whatever, guys are coming back to Christ. And I think that, I can't really speak that well on it, because I'll call my buddy, I'll call Coulter sometimes, like, hey man, when you're on your way to work, call me. I have a question about this or that, and he'll like answer it. So, I can't really say that I can really talk on it either, but I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a good thing. It's definitely a good thing.
I use the word morality a lot, and I use it a lot with my local guys. I think there's a return to the sense of morality.
Yes.
Because we've got guys in our group that aren't Christian by any means, but everybody seems to be in the same moral sense and thought process. And I think that's kind of starts to develop that community sense, that village, that tribal mentality that you were kind of talking about before. Is we may not all see the bigger picture the same, but everything that goes on down here, we agree. And we want to make things better for ourselves and those around us.
Yeah, the here and the now. Everybody's on the same wavelength for the most part.
And it's funny you talk about like the parallel community that you're trying to develop, because that quite literally is kind of what where a lot of us are trying to do. Yeah, you may live in a town of 5,000 people, but you really only care about 10, 20, maybe 30, 40 families, in your immediate circle. Not that you don't care about your community, but your immediate sense of responsibility is those in your tribe. It's kind of like goes back to the 2020, like find your tribe thing. Like this is my tribe. If everything goes wrong, we're gonna just all come here and just make a little 1650s village.
Yep. Circle the wagons.
It's like, and I like how much people have started to go back towards gardening and homesteading and whatnot, regardless of what scale everybody's trying to do it on. And it makes me wonder, at what point does that become so popular that the infamous they tries to shut that down in some form? Because I on social media, like even for like my business TikTok, and I hate having a TikTok. It was just the one app I didn't get deleted off of, so I had to have a business TikTok. But like my business TikTok is just like full of chicken and homesteading videos, because I like a lot of that kind of stuff, because it's better than my feed being full of thirst traps. Oh God. Which that's a whole different conversation.
Don't even get me started.
I know. Regardless of people's political mindsets, a lot of people are going back to, let's build raised beds. Let's have chickens. How do I do meat rabbits? How do I, make bread? Blah, 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 blah. So, at what point does the infamous they go? Those people are getting a little too independent for my liking.
Yeah. I think that's already started to happen. In small scale, you see a lot of the attacks on, bird flu, and then this and that, and then the price of eggs goes up. I think that to a very small extent, it has started to happen, but it won't take much for the media to say, well, if you know someone that's raising chickens on their own, it's probably a bad practice, and it's indicative that they don't trust government. So if you see someone raising chickens, just know that they're probably an extremist, and it's not going to take much. It's going to happen.
That's really true. I've seen some of that already. It's weird how openly biased and goal-driven the media of all senses really are. Because there are, I remember there were even like small government municipals and whatnot at some point throughout like 2022 that said if your neighbor is a prepper and keeps extra food and water around their house, that's a sign of extremism. Like out of all the things that have continued to happen over the past 3 years alone, national and international, having extra food and water is now a sign that you're an extremist.
Oh my God.
After they locked us in our houses, like it's mind blowing to me.
Oh yeah. I can't even begin to wrap my head around these things, man. Like sometimes I see these headlines and I'm just so worn out. Like someone will come up to me just like gasping out of breath, like, can you believe this? And I'm just like, yeah, I can believe it. It's been happening. It's been happening.
The amount of our infrastructure that's been destroyed over the past 9 months is very odd.
Oh yeah.
And I think there's probably a logical reason for most of that. I mean, if you look at, if you talk to anybody that's in trades, you know, the logistical side of parts and maintenance is still very, very, very behind. Yeah, your favorite cereal might be back on the shelf in the store, but that doesn't mean, you know, that the water treatment plant down the road has correct, you know, parts for regular maintenance, or that they have enough maintenance guys to actually do proper work. And instead it's just one guy stretched over 12 hours, and there's only 4 dudes, and they're always on call, and they're just, you know, tired out of their minds.
I mean, we're already seeing that. So if I could, I'm not going to make a pun here because it's the wrong thing to do, but I'm going to derail real quick, and I'm going to derail. So we're already seeing the effects of this. So once that derailment in East Palestine, Ohio happened, of course, naturally, the news and everybody else starts reporting on all these other derailments. Okay, well, first of all, these do happen. I don't want to say often, but they happen more often than people are aware.
Yeah, it's almost daily when you look at the actual number. Right.
So, but I do think it has gotten worse. Now, that very well could be a result of our government telling CSX and all these other, you know, railroad companies and all their workers, fuck you, get back to work. We're not giving you an extra sick day. Like, these people have, like, no joke, been railroaded. Like, railroad workers got fucked. And they should have went on strike. And I know they did, but the union did them wrong. The government did them wrong. But I think we're seeing a result of that because either more people are quitting, or they're not hiring candidates who can actually fill that role. They're not hiring people who care. They're desperate for bodies to put in these roles, and we're seeing these mistakes happen. And I think personally at an increasing rate. So we're seeing the effects of that, and to think that that's not going to happen with your local township and the water treatment plant there, I mean, that's a stretch to think that that's not happening as well.
I think the parts and the maintenance side of this plays an even bigger role. I mean, because you got to think about how much material, if not complete parts or sets of parts, comes from overseas.
Yeah.
And, you know, all of that is on the wayside. You know, the COVID policies in China alone has, you know, devastated worldwide logistics, but now sanctions on any country that does anything that we say is not okay, and the war in Ukraine and price of fuel, and I mean, it's everything just is kind of falling apart. I'm not 100% a believer that there's like little Russian and Chinese agents running around destroying all of our infrastructure. I think we're just kind of bearing the consequences of our own action or inaction, and we're just now kind of starting to really recognize it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty plausible, especially with the just-in-time supply system or supply chain that we have as a country.
Now, the one thing that has been weird, aside from this, is the amount of food processing plants that have caught fire, and just random kind of flock or herds of animals throughout large industrial complexes that just have died off. They just die. It's that part's odd.
And you know, I don't hate to get conspiratorial. Conspiracy theories are fun, but you know, loose lips sink ships. I'm not trying to spread, you know, FUD here or anything, but it's really odd. It's really odd when a meat replacement company owns stock in like other companies that specialize in poultry, beef, and things like that, and then all this shit starts happening. Just saying. I'm just saying.
And, you know, the drought that we had last year was brutal.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we've had a very odd winter, because it's been a wet winter, at least for us East Coasters, but it's been warm. But out west, throughout like the plains and then into California and whatnot, it's been really cold. Like we've done I was looking at a map the other day, you know, being a weather nerd, and pretty much we're at the extreme opposites of each other. Like, we're at like record warm for our time of year here, and they're at record cold. Like, there's parts of California that has 8 feet of snow right now.
Yeah, I seen that. That's actually news that does surprise me right now.
And, you know, even like if you go to like Oklahoma and parts of Kansas and places throughout the plains area, the Midwest, they still, even through winter, are at like record levels of low precipitation.
Yeah.
Which in turn just really hits, you know, like the cattle market and whatnot, and the price of hay. The price of hay out west is unbelievable.
Really?
Yeah. Earlier in the podcast, like episode 3 or 4, somewhere around there, I had my buddy Willard on here who lives out in Wyoming, and we talked about it. And I have several other rancher friends just from the Marine Corps and other connections that live throughout Wyoming, Montana, Iowa, the Dakotas, so on and so forth. And hay is just expensive. Some of those guys are driving like all the way to like Arkansas and Mississippi and states like that just to get hay, and then are trailering it back.
Wow.
You gotta put that into perspective of diesel prices being higher than they ever have been, especially this time last year. That their option was to drive 2,500, 3,000 miles to get hay because it beat the cost of hay that's in their local area.
That's wild.
So our agriculture, in a sense, is shaky, to say the best, and the rest of the world is not exactly is not exactly doing better either. And you know, the wheat and barley and corn development, I guess I should say harvest, coming from this coming year, after this, as we go into the second year of the war in Ukraine, is going to be even worse.
Yeah,
because there's always about a 9 to 12 month offset of food availability. So like the food we're eating right now is really the tail end of like the 2021 harvest. And then so after the cusp of this summer, we start to eat the 2022 harvest, just because that's, you know, how big the international chain of food really is. So, you know, after this summer, when we start eating last year's harvest, you know, how much different does food prices change? What does the availability look like? And then if we have another repeat of this summer and fall, of last summer and fall, 2024 looks even worse.
It's not looking good, honestly.
I'm growing so much corn this year.
We actually just had a meeting last week about what we were going to grow in our garden, and you know, what changes we were going to make, and so on and so forth. So I might actually, off the podcast, I might actually be hitting you up on tips for our garden and whatnot. Yeah, but you know, it's gotten to a point where it's serious enough to us that I don't like sweet potatoes, but it was brought up that we should probably put sweet potatoes and other things that are often used in baby food in the garden, because a lot of us have babies, either babies on the way, babies that are still eating, you know, mushy food and whatnot. But, you know, anybody who does have a kid or has some on the way, or, you know, it's something to consider, is, you know, what your children are going to eat as well.
I don't mean, you know, to throw my own buddies under the bus, but their pain is everybody else's learning lessons. Do you remember the formula shortage we had this time last year?
Yep.
I had a buddy whose baby was like 3 or 4 months old at that point, and breastfeeding was no longer really becoming an option. And he was a part of my local crew at the time. He has since then kind of departed on good terms. But for the longest time, I was like, dude, you need to make sure you got your kids' prep squared away. Like, I know it seems ridiculous or whatever, but if something happens, that kid is the most important thing in the world. And you need to have it squared away. And he didn't. Months and months and months passed, and then all of a sudden we run into a formula shortage at the time where they're starting to transition out of breastfeeding or whatever. And he was in a panic for weeks, driving to, you know, half a dozen stores every day after work all throughout the region, trying to find formula every single day. And I was like, dude, I told you.
Yep.
Prepping is the most simple sense of insurance that you can do.
Yep.
And for some reason, people act like it's this giant hassle or it's this giant chore that they have to do.
Yeah.
When it's not. Tackling 19 homesteading projects at once, that's extreme.
Yeah, it's a little tough.
But simply just putting extra food and maybe some medicine and, some dried goods away in a closet or in a room that you don't use in your house is not hard.
No, it's something you can buy your way out of.
It's probably once at this point, just because money's tighter now, but it's probably once every other month I pick a dried good and I just fill an entire 30-gallon tub full of it in Mylar bags, rice, flour, sugar, whatever it might be. Earlier in the pandemic, I was doing either a rice, oats, sugar, or flour pretty much every single month. But now expenses are a little tighter, and I've picked up many, many hobbies. I wouldn't even call them hobbies. I guess I would say self-sufficiency aspects, obviously with the property and everything.
Night vision.
Night vision as well. Night vision was definitely a part of that at one point in time.
Yeah.
Get night vision, kids. You need night vision.
Yes. Well, that brings up a good topic. And it's something that it's just a short one, but it's something that a lot of guys don't really necessarily think about in our circles, is budgeting. Mm-hmm. Guys, you got to budget. Like whether it's prepping and buying rice every time you go to the store, or buying, a dried good like Jeremy was just talking about, or whether you want to buy night vision. If you waste your money and you're not careful with your money and you just blow money on like 6 different subscription services and Spotify and all this other, useless stuff, and then you claim you don't have money for like night vision or whatever, well, I mean, you need to learn how to budget better. Mm-hmm. And if you learn how to budget better, it's going to be better for yourself and your family, if you have one, in the long run. Whether it's prepping or buying night vision or money for training. I mean, learn to budget.
Yeah. If you're a person that's really been into like the tactical essence of stuff for a couple months, and you're like, I can't afford night vision right now, like that's understandable. You just got into this.
Yeah.
But if you've been telling me for 3.5, 4 years that you can't afford night vision, there are a few circumstances where that is possibly acceptable. Mm-hmm. But like you just said, if you're blowing money on other, wasteful things on a monthly basis, then, you really don't have an excuse at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, even if you save $50 a month for like 3 years, which is like a 12-pack in a subscription service of your choice, you're at almost $2,000.
Yep.
That's the bare minimum of savings right there. $2,000 is almost at like a good PBS 14.
Yep.
I mean, you could probably I think you can get into like green PBS 14s at this point for like $2,000 to $2,500.
Yeah.
And white phosphorus is as low as $3,000 at this point.
Oh, dude,
you gotta buy the mount, which the mount's expensive. But.
Yeah. I mean, there's everything that comes along with it, but yeah, I mean that's something else to take into consideration. But what people don't realize is that I believe it was your last podcast where you're talking about buying night vision, and you said you put it on credit. It's not necessarily a bad thing, because you can have that now and train with it now. And if you're strict on your budgeting, and you were going to be putting away, $200 a week or $100 a week or however much, and that can be going towards your credit card payment instead, if you are strict. Mm-hmm. It's not a bad idea, because you can build credit by buying night vision.
Yeah, it's
not the worst idea. But
it's no different than building credit through like getting a used car or doing anything like that.
Exactly. And what most guys don't know, PayPal doesn't want you to know this, but you could put your credit card on PayPal and pay someone for something used, so you can get it even cheaper, and then pay on it like you would where you would have bought it new, and it's a win-win situation. That's what I did. And I got a Gen 3 green phosphor PBS 14 with Carson glass, and basically no blims for $1,800. So
nice.
But I'm gonna get off my
the night vision soapbox.
Yeah.
I feel like more people are starting to come around to it, but it's honestly at this point moving forward, if someone tells me they can't afford it, it's a little bit more understandable than it was like a year or two ago.
Yeah,
because times are times are different.
Yep, that's for sure.
My home escrow for my monthly mortgage payment just went up like $320 a month.
Same.
I mean, if you start throwing curveballs at people like that, and you tell me you can't afford a piece of gear, it's a little more understandable. Circumstance dependent.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, kids. If you've got 2 kids and your wife's a stay-at-home mom, and you're like, I can't afford night vision, I'll understand that.
Yep.
But if you're like different. 23 living in an apartment by yourself, it's like, all right, let's manage our money a little bit better. Let's get us some night vision now.
Yeah. Man, guys,
need you for that night patrol.
Yeah, these young guys that come out to these classes, and believe it or not, the majority of guys that I have come to my classes are Zoomers, and I don't want to say I told you so, but I would tell people years ago, like, hey, these Zoomers, these are going to be the next generation. These are going to be the guys taking classes, especially affordable classes. Like, these are going to be the next generation of guys doing this, and a lot of the guys that sign up for my classes are Zoomers. Or they're my age, so they're millennials. But these younger guys who are still living at home, sometimes after class we'll talk, and I'm like, asking them about, they'll be asking about night vision. I'm like, well, do you have night vision? They're like, no. I'm like, do you live at home? Yeah. Do you have a girlfriend? I mean, that doesn't really matter or not, but if you're living at home and you're not paying rent, like, what are you doing? Like, buy night vision.
Yeah, that's night vision in 3 months.
Dude, that's night vision, like, fast.
Shit. Hell, my mortgage, that's night vision in 2 months.
Oh my God, dude.
Don't get me started on the housing market. Don't even get me started on the housing market.
I got my house just in time. I mean, I can't really complain. We got a really good price on ours, but like I originally wanted to build because that's what my parents did, and I still want to, but like it's just fucking outrageous now. But that's another time, I guess. Yeah. But
so kind of in the topic of gear and whatnot, what are, as far as like the community sense goes, those small group guys, what do you think some of the biggest overlooked pieces of gear might be?
Medical, 100%. That's number one, man. Guys will have a fucking PEC 15 on their rifle before they have a full med kit, and that's fucking ridiculous.
That's crazy.
Yeah, like, hey, good on you for buying that expensive stuff, bro. But what are you gonna do if you
Where's your IFAC?
what are you gonna do about an arterial bleed, my guy? Like, I mean, so. And the thing is, like, medical is so cheap, especially compared to everything else. Like, it's not free, but like, man, you can get a stocked IFAC for under $200.
Yeah, I mean, shit, our IFAC, which is underpriced as it is only $110. And I think commercially it's valued at like $212 if you bought all of that yourself.
Man of the people right here.
Yeah. My dad yells at me all the time because I don't charge to correct profit ratios. But I'm like, the people need it. Yeah. It needs to be cheaper.
There's a delicate balance, and I understand what you mean. Like, when guys come up and hand me money for class, I'm always like, I cringe a little bit because I'm like, I'm taking money from these people to show them what I know. Like, oh God, I feel like the worst person in the world. But at the same time, you gotta realize, like, you as a teacher and myself as a teacher and you as a retailer as well. It's like, hey, we gotta make money on this stuff so that we can keep expanding, so that we can keep doing this good work. I eventually want to transition over to just straight up part-time teaching and working where I'm at part-time, because I want to keep my insurance, but I want to be able to make a living off that, because man, the more I do that, the more people I can attract, the more money I can make, the more classes I can take myself and bring that value back to these guys here. These guys here aren't gonna get on a plane and fly out west to go see Travis Haley and learn all this shit. But hey, I can learn that stuff, and I can do it a few times, and I can really get a good grasp on some of these things and bring the value back to these guys. That's how I view it.
And yeah, in the 15, 16, going on 16 months now that I've been a legit legal business with ECT, I have not taken a single dime in pay.
Yeah.
Not a single dime. Everything has gone towards either buying more product and putting product in more places, like our IFACs and everything. I finally got our IFACs into the realm of other people's retail, but also like expanding on different like production equipment, or maybe even just funding projects to come up with ideas or change something myself. So like there may not be an immediate turnaround as far as like a product with a set price after that, but we invested into an experiment per se.
Yeah.
Plus just paying bills. Being a business is expensive.
Fuck yeah, it is, dude. I mean, there's so many bills.
It's like at this point, between like, email services and whatnot to have like a more official email, the price of actually of having a website, shipping, which I talked about last episode.
Unreal.
Me needing multiple separate phones because Instagram decided to delete me about 16 times in 2022.
Oh my god.
That's, all of that really adds up. Just running the business itself is expensive.
Dude, just running a business will nickel and dime you to death.
Mm-hmm.
I experienced that for sure.
But
we're largely doing the same thing with ours, and we're talking as a business like, hey, I'm going to show up. I'm going to be putting in 8 hours on a Saturday away from my family, away from a new child. I'm going to take a small bit of that money and then put it towards if Coulter can't come out and my good buddy Kyle comes out to help with the class, I'm going to buy his lunch and I'm going to put a little bit of gas in his tank. But other than that, the money goes straight back into the business, and we're looking at buying a Juki sewing machine, or some more steel for the classes and stuff like that. So
nice.
I totally understand that.
Outside of medical, though, what other gear do you feel like we're kind of starting to dive into, or do you think is kind of overlooked?
The first thing that comes to mind personally is we're going to take a step back here and go back to night vision. Mm-hmm. I think night vision gets kind of overlooked because people perceive it as expensive, and it is expensive, but the fact is that people can afford it. So it goes right to night vision. Other than that,
we talked about this.
Good footwear.
Oh, no, that wasn't what we talked about. But also, good footwear is important. What did we just talk about yesterday?
You're talking to a sick man right now, and I mean that like physically. I'm physically sick, so not mentally sick. Remind me again.
It's a big hot topic on Instagram right now.
You're going to have to pause this podcast, and I'm going to get on Telegram and go back and look.
Comms.
Oh, yeah. Comms, dude.
Comms.
Big time. Comms, because shit's fucking like hard to understand. You got to have a comms nerd, man.
So shout out to Comms and Logistics, because he was my comms sensei when I started diving into all of this. And that's one thing I always used to tell him when he was teaching me everything and sending me links to learn stuff, is that comms is not an easy topic to understand as it is, let alone there is not a knowledge base outside of ham for the civilian side of all of this.
Yeah.
And unless you have a guy that has some sorts of maybe career in something communications, or like a very extensive career in the military with comms, I mean, self-teaching yourself comms is it's near impossible.
Yeah.
It's not impossible, but it's near impossible. And because even if you can teach yourself off the internet, it's hard to find the resources to actually do everything that you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Let alone, there's the legalities of a lot of things surrounding comms without getting into anything specific.
Yep.
And what the community is trying to accomplish at this point, for a lot of people, borderline does not necessarily fit into the realms of legality.
Yeah.
Which I don't care about. It's whatever. Do what you think is best for your individual group. But that's also not. Let me also specify, everyone. I'm not telling everyone to go commit felonies. I need to make that very clear.
Yeah, that's a $10,000 push to talk.
Yeah. So be wise with your, experiments and what you venture into. But comms is something that's extremely limited. And that's the thing, because I'm in a lot of comms chats on Instagram at this point with a lot of other pages, is that as much as we want to try and influence and change the culture of comms, the more we learn, there's also only so much you can post publicly. I may be able to tell you something privately and it's no big deal. But if I just post it for the public to see, Motorola or Kenwood or, whoever may come back and be like, that's illegal or you're violating blah, blah, blah. And they have public proof of it now. So like if I want to try and teach someone how to be able to program and fix all of their handhelds in-house, I want them to be completely independent to do it. That requires some software that you're really not supposed to have. So I can't just make a public Instagram post with a how-to video and then a link to this public software that I posted. You just can't do that. It's unfortunate, but that's just kind of how it is. The market is just limited in that sense. Like the biggest thing I'm diving into right now is man packs for like dedicated field radio operators. And knowledge aside, the civilian market of gear to support secure man-pack radios, not analog man-pack radios similar to like how the tech prepper does, which he does a really good job. It's just not secure for like any sense of like true tactical comms. The civilian market's just not there for it. It's just not, because everything we're moving towards now is just outdated or surplus government gear that is no longer in use. So there's never been a market for the civilian basis. Yeah.
And it doesn't help that, posting about comms on Instagram isn't sexy, like dudes can post their rifle builds up and guys will run out and grab an EOTech because everyone else is running an EOTech, like lickety split. But, someone's like, oh, hey, check out these Motorola, radios that you can get on eBay for this price. And then someone's like, nah, I'm good. Or they do buy it. And it's like, well, I can't actually use this because for some reason it's stuck in this mode. And if I use this, I'm going to go to prison or whatever, jail, get fined $10,000. So I think like the barrier to entry being knowledge for radios is what kind of turns people off.
But it's so crucial at the same time.
Oh, insanely crucial.
I mean, essentially nothing works without communication. If you're outside of a very, very small element, no bigger than a squad at any given point in time, 8 to 13 guys, depending on what doctrine you're kind of running off of. If you're in anything bigger than that and you don't have a comms plan and SOPs surrounding comms, nothing works. Even if it's just the preparedness aspect. If you're dealing with more than a small handful of people, stuff gets really difficult to manage.
It does.
Especially if you take away cell phones, because cell phones are already a security risk as it is.
Yeah, well, I mean, we see that in the war footage in Ukraine and everything, man.
Yeah. So. Hopefully people don't have to learn that lesson the hard way on our soil.
Yeah. You see someone taking selfies at the FTX, you know what to do.
I would hate for Antifa to mortar my position.
Oh my god. That would be the worst, man. I mean, it's bad enough that you died, but at the hands of
Antifa's furry mortar team.
Oh my god, no.
Put that into perspective. You died because a furry mortar team caught you on your cell phone.
Like the footage shows the mortar coming down with a little tail on the end.
It's with glitter.
Oh my god. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right in that aspect. If anybody who's listening has done any sort of training with more than 15 people, even walking in a staggered column through woods, the person all the way in the back has no idea what's going on all the way up in the front, and then even just that far of a distance, communication starts to break down. Imagine, something going wrong and then having to communicate with someone in an administrative area during something like a field training exercise. and you don't have the radios to do it,
Or even like just basic vehicle work.
Yes. Dude.
You can be right on top of each other, but if you guys don't have comms with each other, nothing matters. You just got to follow the guy at the very front and hope that he knows what's going on. And
exactly.
If he doesn't, then that's just kind of how it goes, because you can't talk to him.
Yeah, we do that. Like when we go on vacation and there's like 2 or 3 cars going, I'm like, hey, here's a Baofeng, here's a Baofeng, here's a Baofeng. This seems to be the safest channel. Don't transmit unless you need to. And people are like, what do we need walkie-talkies for? But when you're gonna miss an exit in 6 seconds, and you don't have the time to pick up your phone, unlock it, call somebody, wait for them to answer, and say, hey, take the exit we just passed 6 seconds ago. Yeah. I mean, that's just such a simple example, is the vehicles. You're absolutely right.
And even like, this is the other part that I'm trying to tackle right now, because I don't have enough projects on my hands.
Oh, of course.
Is like more long distance comms from like the preparedness aspect, like just base stations in houses. There's no secure way of doing it. You can set up HF voice communications just like any standard ham guy does, but it's not secure. That's my biggest thing is, how much money do we invest into something if it's not going to be secure as it is?
Right.
Are we really going to build out $700 to $800 base stations and antennas with battery supply and whatnot in everybody's houses, only for some dude with a $40 Amazon scanner to hear us?
Yeah, it's see,
it's a difficult topic.
I think that's something else that people run into. They're like, "Hey, man, I just spent damn near $1,000 on these radios." And we can't even use them because someone with a piece of, like you said, $40 piece of equipment picks it up. And especially if it's somewhere stationary. Like, yeah, 100%, man.
And I think that kind of goes into why having a non-documented, or at least publicly available documented SOP or emergency guideline plan on what... Like, let's say you have you and 9 buddies, and your immediate families that live in your house with you are all your responsibilities. So you have 10 families that are a part of your network. And we don't have base stations set up at all of our houses to communicate, and we're too far spread out to utilize handhelds to talk to each other. We're spread out over 2 or 3 counties. But, if something goes wrong, you need to have some sort of well-understood plan in place that says, at this time increment, or when this event occurs, all of the families do this to come together, and it requires no communication at all. Everybody should just know step 1, 2, 3 equals the plan.
Yeah. I've floated something like that with my guys, sort of like a I guess that could fall under a pace plan. Like, hey, look,
it's just a big pace plan.
Your phones don't work, internet doesn't work, handhelds don't work. All right, after this amount of time, we're going to meet here. Yeah. I mean, people don't really think about that either. I mean, I've also floated the idea of wargaming certain things. And this is, I mean, for guys to wargame, it literally costs nothing except for printer ink, or you could just use a tablet or whatever. But we've floated the idea of like, hey, look, what happens if this area in our town or county floods, and we have to do this? Go. It's basically playing Dungeons and Dragons with real life maps and everything, and kind of figuring out what we're going to do. And having a pace plan like that is important.
And it becomes even more difficult to do the bigger your community gets, which some people may want to limit the sense of their community or their network. Some people may not want to limit the sense of their network. You may get up to the point where you have 100 trusted dudes because you're all, self-referenced individuals, and everybody preps and everybody gardens and everybody trades together and everybody trains together. But that's a big plan. That requires a lot of logistics.
It's massive.
And the bigger your organization gets, the more logistics it requires. But you're right, wargaming is a great way to just train all of these aspects without being able to do it. And I was thinking about it today because I was at a local park. I took my horse out for a little exercise ride, like 15, 20 minutes from my house. I was like, this park would be great to train at, but I can't bring 20, 30 dudes here in full kit and set up a command tent and do all this crazy stuff. You know, space is probably the biggest limiting factor, I think, of a lot of people's training.
Yeah, that's another one.
So wargaming, yeah, you may not get all of the real world experience and exposure that you may want, but you know, you get some. And you were in my very brief operational planning class around the SMEAC back in December. I mean that's a lot. Yeah, and that's just planning to do one thing. That's not even like, you know, a whole shebang.
Yeah, but I think that it really brings to light, you know, as long as you have like one person dedicated to playing devil's advocate or like the questionnaire at any given wargaming scenario, like someone says, okay, well, then we're going to take water to this person. Okay, well, what do you have to store water in? Like, is that, like, are those 55-gallon drums that you bought, were those used to transport like some sort of toxic chemical before? Are you sure those are safe for water? Like, so on and so forth. It really brings to light what you do and don't have and what your limitations are.
It's like you said earlier, logistics.
Yeah, I
think a lot of the community is starting to think logistics.
And, you know, that's good. And I seen this start to happen around the time that Grand Thumb was talking about Recce and the whole Recce meme happened, which a lot of people look at the whole Recce meme as like a negative thing. It's like, oh, God, people won't shut the fuck up about Recce. But it's like, hey, look, dude, this is good. Our community's moving. Like, we're moving forward here. This is, yeah, it's a meme, but like, that was a stepping stone, the whole Recce meme. It's like, you know, hey, we're not just focused on Mark 18s and CQB and clone builds now. We're actually moving out to, you know, having rucks and so on. But yeah, I think that was a good thing.
Which I wish he would put out more videos of like how to survive in the mountains or, you know, urban. I wish he'd put out more of those videos. Those videos were top notch.
Oh, dude, 100%. 100%.
But those videos are hard to develop. Yeah. As a guy that does YouTube videos, and I've done, I think, 3 videos of the Modern Minuteman series, those videos are kind of hard to develop because you want them to be, you know, a quality listen. You don't want them to be like some people's YouTube channels where they just stand in the woods and rant for 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, you want it to have good quality to it and the education that comes with the video to be, you know, structured. So it's hard to write.
It is.
And it takes time. And Grand Thumb's, you know, doing this stuff full time now. You know, other channels, you know, smaller channels like ours and whatnot, you know, I'm trying to balance 984 projects while also try to fit in 2 or 3 YouTube videos a month.
I know the feeling.
It's a pain. Social media is, I definitely did not have a understanding or appreciation for like social media people until I unfortunately became a social media person.
It seems a lot more simple than it is, but you know, I mean, hell, dude, ask my wife when I was making that Gun Culture 3.5 post. Some of the photos weren't formatted correctly the first time I posted it, and it like cut off half of them. And I had tagged like 20 freaking people in it, and everyone was like, "Hey man, I can't see the post. What's going on?" And then, you know, someone's like, "Hey, half the pictures are cut off. I can't read them."
What were you using to create those photos?
GIMP. It's like free Photoshop.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so I had to look at my formatting, and then, you know, I had to like type up all that stuff again, and then I would go to post it, and then I'd realize like, oh, there's a little typo here, and then I had to go back and redo it, and you know, I lost like 2 hours of sleep over that, and then had to completely redo it the next day anyways. So I mean, yeah.
So if you're looking to like kind of like how that one was, is like a widescreen. I think yours is in like a 4:3 kind of crop. If you go to if you do PowerPoint, most of my like educational posts come from PowerPoint. PowerPoint, if you screenshot it, so if you download PowerPoint on your phone and send the PowerPoint to your phone and open it, if you screenshot it and then crop that screenshot of your phone to 16:9, it is the exact size of a PowerPoint slide.
Perfect.
So like all of my photos and everything, I just crop. If like I'm doing a background photo with text over it, I just make that photo the entire slide on PowerPoint and then just crop it to 16:9, and it fits. It's perfect every single time. Every single time.
That's what I ended up doing minus the PowerPoint. I was like, oh, okay, well, it's because I'd actually at that point, that was my third time trying to post it, and I was like, everything is 1080 by 720, but the problem was, except for the first photo, the cover photo that said Gun Culture 3.5 was not. And for some reason, because I selected that one first and then all the other ones after, and even though I pressed the little 2 arrows button to like make sure everything looked correct and it was cropped correctly, because for some reason the first photo wasn't the same, it still fucked it all up. So
yeah. It's definitely a little finicky. There's a bit of a learning curve when it comes to it all.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, bud, do you have any other big talking points you want to discuss, or any theories or guidance? Any dad guidance?
Oh, dude, I'm not even a dad yet, but
you can be a father.
I will say this, and this is something I post about. Hey, I appreciate that. I like that. One thing I do want to say, and this is something I talk about all the time, but it's not as popular as like talking about gun culture, is the fact that you are always watched. Whether it is by your cousins, your nieces, your in-law niece or in-law nephew, or someone's brother's cousin's neighbor who's around you, whether you're at the gym, whether it's your children or your wife or your parents or your God or your ancestors, you're always being watched. So always set the best example you can, no matter what, and always hold yourself as if you're being watched and judged 24/7, because you want to be what you preach. And if you preach good things, then you need to do good things. And if you don't do good things, then you're a fucking fake. So do good, and always hold yourself as if you are being watched and setting the example, because you are. Someone is always watching you. So set that good example and be the change you want to see.
That's deep, and that's very true. There's been many times in life where I've been like, if someone was watching me, would I act differently? I find myself in the gym say that a lot too. I'm like, if I was working out with a partner right now, would I do these extra reps even though I'm tired as shit, or this feels heavier than it normally is today? Or,
nice.
I think about that sometimes. So I think that's a very good, piece of guidance. So thank you. And thank you for coming on the podcast.
Oh, dude, thanks for having me. Like, for sure. Like, thank you for having me. Like, I've always been very impressed with your business, and I've always been like impressed with how your group holds themselves and everything else. So it's a pleasure being on here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that. All right, guys, that's all I've got for episode 19, Evolution of Training and Culture. As always, train hard, train often.
Tell me turn it down and I'ma only turn up louder. Call me what you wanna, but you can't call me no coward. Strength in numbers, we the people, still the ones with power. Fighting fire with fire, time to take back what is ours. Tell me turn it down and I'ma only turn up louder. Call me what you wanna, but you can't call me no coward. Strength in numbers.